All right, now we're working on number 2 for the problems for 8.7. So for this second one, we're going to want to use the substitution method here. Because here you'll notice in this first equation we have y equals 2x minus 6. So the y is already by itself instead of the x's and y's being lined up like we had in the first problem. So to start out with the substitution method, it's like it sounds. We want to substitute what y is equal to here in for y in this other equation. So here in this case we would have our 3x minus 2, and then make sure once you're substituting the value in that you put it in parentheses. You want that entire 2x minus 6 to go in for y, and then is equal to 8 because we're plugging it into that second equation. Once again, we're using that one because the first equation is already a y equals, so that variable is already by itself. So once we get that set up, we want to go through and solve like we normally would, since we have all x's here. So we'd want to distribute that 2 through to the parentheses. So we'd have our 3x minus 4x plus 12 equals 8 still. And then combine your like terms like normal. So we'd have negative x plus 12 is still equal to that 8. And then we can subtract the 12 from both sides of the equation to get the x part by itself. So we'd have negative x is equal to negative 4. But remember, we do not want our variable to be negative that we're solving for. It needs to be just x, not a negative x. So to get rid of that negative, we could divide both sides by negative 1. Since having that negative in front is the same thing as saying negative 1 times that x. Because remember, negative times a positive makes it negative. So here, to cancel out that negative, we divide by negative 1, so we get x equals 4. Once again, do not stop once you get one of those variables. You want to go through, plug that back in to get your other one. So here in this case, we would have our y equals 2 times the 4 minus 6. And I chose that first equation to substitute this back into because the second one is what we use to get the x value. And then like before, whenever we're solving equations, we can definitely go through and check our answer by going through and plugging back in both the x and the y value into both equations. So instead of just plugging in one value like you had for one equation, plug in both the x and the y. So here in this case we get 2, so in this case we have y equals 2. So sometimes your answers may turn out to be whole numbers like we have here, or like the first problem you might end up with fractions. Just depends on what you're given for a problem. So if you're going to write this out as a coordinate point, we would have 4, 2 as your final answer. So make sure, like I said, you can go through and double check your answers by plugging back in the x and the y into both equations, because sometimes it'll work in just one equation and not the other one, depending on what your mistake might be in case you do make a mistake. So if you have questions, make sure to ask like normal.